Okay, folks, this is the drill. I'm Ron. Welcome to Story Time. Facile formulas, catchy slogans, 10-step programs, and quick fixes too often dominate today's management training programs. But in organizations, as in all of life, human behavior is seldom predictable, and business dilemmas do not easily lend themselves to gimmicks or simplistic answers. In Management of the Absurd, psychologist, educator, and former CEO Richard Farson presents a series of management paradoxes designed to challenge conventional wisdom and encourage managers to re-examine their assumptions about effective leadership. Today, we are on Section 3, which is the paradoxes of communication, and Chapter 9, the more we communicate, the less we communicate. The notion that people need to communicate more is perhaps the most widely accepted idea in management, indeed in all human relationships. Whether it's called counseling, team building, conflict resolution, or negotiating, it all boils down to one idea, that if we talk it over, things will get better. Well, yes and no. I certainly won't say that we don't need to talk, but communication, like everything else in human affairs, seldom works the way we think it does. Most organizations, in fact, are over-communicating. Meetings, conferences, memos, phone calls, and electronic mail overwhelm managers and employees alike. Increasingly, we seem to believe that everybody should be in on everything. The classic experiment that put the lie to that belief was conducted many years ago by management consultant and organizational psychologist Alex Bavelas. This study, which came to be known as the line and circle experiment, divided participants into two groups. In one, all information was fed by the group members to a central person, top-down line management, you might say. In the other, the information was shared around a circle, more like participative management. Both groups were given the same problem to solve. For example, each member of each group was given a box of different colored marbles, and the groups were then asked to identify the one color that was common to all boxes. When the marbles were all of solid colors, making them easier to distinguish and to describe, the line group did much better than the group in a circle. But then the problem was changed slightly to make it more complex. The marbles were no longer solid colors, but were more mottled in design. The circle group, where each person could talk to the next, not just the leader, adjusted to the change more quickly and therefore did better than the line group. These findings have been used to support the idea of participative management for many years. One of the lesser-known findings of the research, however, is of special interest to us. When all lines of communication were open, when participants could talk not only to the persons next to them, but to all other members of the group, then the problem-solving ability of the group diminished markedly and it became virtually paralyzed. In other words, there seems always to be an optimal level of communication beyond which further or expanded communication becomes dysfunctional. Communication has its limits. A formula for tedium. Complete communications can be quite boring. In one management training exercise often done to demonstrate both the difficulty and the importance of achieving accurate communication, participants are not allowed to speak unless they first satisfy the previous speaker that his or her remarks were fully understood. This is done by repeating the previous speaker's message, not in a parroting way, but in one's own words, and then obtaining his or her agreement that the summation is accurate. Not surprisingly, this agreement is often hard to get. Eventually, participants learn the necessity and value of careful listening. When the experiment is conditioned beyond a few minutes, however, it begins to wear on the participants. Even though the heat has gone out of the discussion and people are fully understanding each other, an enormous amount of boredom sets in. Accurate communication has become both tedious and stifling. The exercise reminds us that the transfer of accurate information is only a small part of the role communication plays in our lives. Power problems in disguise. Many suppose communication problems are actually balance of power problems. That is why it is probably unwise to introduce completely open communication into a situation in which there is a large disparity in power. The unintended but damaging result is to increase the power of the already powerful and reduce the power of the already powerless. For example, in marriage counseling, if the person who feels rejected is asked to communicate his or her needs to the person doing the rejecting, it can actually worsen matters by making the rejected person even less attractive and more vulnerable to the other person. The same is true in boss-employee relationships. When subordinates are asked to communicate honestly with their superiors, they run the risk of becoming more vulnerable, with potentially harmful consequences. One wonders how many people there are like one woman I know who is encouraged by her associates to go to her boss and clear the air. She did, and was fired soon afterward. It is only when the balance of power is relatively equal and truly candid communication can and should take place. Enough already. Organizations that believe all the troubles can be solved through increased communication may be in for a surprise. In a research project conducted by the Western Behavioral Sciences Institute, we set up an experimental information center at a major aerospace corporation. Employees who needed answers to questions could call the center to get them. To our initial puzzlement, the more the center succeeded in satisfying the questioners, and the more popular it became, the more nervous management grew. The company's executives were concerned that the chain of command was being circumvented. If employees don't know something, they should ask their supervisors. That non-work related questions were being asked, who can sing bass in a Christmas quartet? And that organization might have difficulty accommodating such a potentially active service. What if the center gets thousands of calls a day? When calls reached several hundred a day, the center was discontinued. The episode illustrated that rapid and accurate communication of information may be less important to management than our other organizational concerns. Data don't matter. Most top-level executives make little use of the computers that connect them to their company's management information systems. The usual explanation is that they are computer naive, but it is more likely that the information systems are not giving executives what they want and need. Absurdly, we have management information systems that do not serve management. These systems to gather and store mountains of data almost always ignore the actual needs of executives in favor of what others, operating on the basis of their best guesses, imagine these executives' needs to be. The guesses are based on what surely are logical assumptions. Executives need personnel statistics, inventory display, sales figures, and the like, but almost all of this information is quantitative rather than qualitative, and it is of little use to top managers who are dealing with predicaments that seldom yield to logical analysis. What these executives require is more likely to come from the advice of their colleagues than from comprehensive displays of data. They need interpretations, opinions, information that has been massaged. That is why executives spend almost all their time communicating in meetings, in memos, or on the phone. Given the choice between data and each other, they choose each other. Soon the computer will be ubiquitous, invisibly embedded everywhere in our work environments, sensitive to our working styles. It already carries text, voice, sound, both moving and still images, graphics, machine translation, and an astounding array of databases, and more. Engineers are confident that this impressive technology will eventually make its way into the executive suite. But to genuinely serve top management, information systems must be based on studies of the real interactions of top executives. Designed from the top down, as it were, an information system might then emerge that actually serves the strategic interests of organizations. But until then, no chance. And that was Chapter 9 of Management of the Absurd. The more we communicate, the less we communicate. And I will go ahead and make my comments on my blog at www.ronaldhardgrove.blogspot.com. And so tomorrow is going to be the next chapter of this book, and it is Chapter 10, In Communication, Form is More Important Than Content. And that's tomorrow. So until then, that was easy. See ya.